بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، إخوة الإسلام يا عباد الله, it's well known to all that may be watching the current climate that's taking place here in the U.S. as it relates to the racial unrest. And as a result of that, there's been a lot of discussions amongst the Muslims, particularly within the black community, as it relates to what are the viable solutions uh, to some of the things that are taking place here within the States. So, because this question comes up quite often, I want to take this time to basically deal with that somewhat. And the basis of my discussion would be that advancement of the black Muslim voice within the black community is an essential part to the solution that we find taking place today in this particular society. Now, I want to begin this particular discussion with the statement of Allah wa ta'ala when He says, وَإِنَّهُ لَكِتَابٌ عَزِيزٌ. That indeed, and I'm going to translate directly from the Noble Quran because I believe the translation, especially as it relates to Aziz, was much better. But in the Noble Quran, it's translated as, and verily it is an honorable, well fortified, respected book. يعني لكتاب عزيز لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ولا من خلفه تنزيل من حكيم حميد. Falsehood cannot come to it from before it or behind it. It is sent down by the all-wise, worthy of all praise. Yani Allah, the all-wise, worthy of all praise. This particular verse is one of the verses that gives us an illustration as it relates to the virtues of al-Islam, to the virtues of Allah wa ta'ala's legislation, that it is perfect as it relates to being a source of guidance for those that adopt it, that no falsehood can come before it nor behind it. It is a strong, well fortified, and or tremendous book, and that which is contained therein is a source of benefit for the people. It's a source of benefit for the people. In this particular verse and others, we find that the Quran is mahfuz, that it is protected and or preserved from anyone inserting into it that which will bring about a diminishing as it relates to its status, yani it being guidance, that it is protected. As Allah wa ta'ala clearly states in the verse, لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ولا من خلفه, that no falsehood falsehood cannot come near to it from before or behind it. No falsehood can be inserted into it to bring about a diminishing in its perfect nature. And tanzilun min Hakim Hamid. And this portion of the verse is very important, that it has been sent down by he who is all wise. He who is all wise. As Sheikh Abdul Rahman ibn Nasir as Sa'di, he states concerning the statement of Allah, Tanzilun min Hakim, يعني في خلقه وأمره يضع كل شيء موضعه. That this is as it relates to his creation and his command and or decisions, that he places everything in its place. He places everything in its place. This name Al-Hakim is without a doubt a name that is pointing to the quality of Al-Hikmah, Al-Hikmah, or wisdom, a flawless wisdom, a perfect wisdom that is attributed to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. But likewise, the ulama, they also states that not only does it point to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala having perfect wisdom, but it also points to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala having a perfect hukum, or ruling and or judgment. Ruling and or judgment. So this is what this name points to. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is teaching us that this is who sent it down. One who is perfect as it relates to his wisdom, and one who is perfect as it relates to his rulings and or judgments. Thus, when looking at this and contemplating upon this, then the Muslim has no doubt that, look, this legislation that Allah Ta'ala has revealed from above the seven heavens, it is a means for the rectification of mankind. And it is guidance for mankind, as Allah Ta'ala has described it himself. Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, he states, and I'm going to read the translation once again, the month of Ramadan, in which was revealed the Quran, a guidance for mankind and clear proofs for the guidance and the criterion. And then in parentheses, between right and wrong. Between right and wrong. So when looking at this and contemplating on this, on that which was just presented, then the Muslim has no doubt that the remedy that is currently plaguing the American society from a racial unrest and racial strife and discord and thus forth and so on, then the solution to this overall problem is Al-Islam. The solution to this overall problem is the guidance of Allah. The solution to this overall problem is the flawless and or superior legislation of Al-Islam. And the Muslims have no doubt in that whatsoever. When we look at what has been taking place here in the States, especially as it relates to racial injustice here within the States, then we see within the Black community since the Civil Rights era that Black folks have been fighting for racial equality as it relates to the Civil Rights era for the last 6 decades. We know it's been longer than that in reality, but when just dealing with the Civil Rights era, for the last 6 decades, Black Americans have been marching to stop police brutality and have been marching to stop inequality in varying aspects of this society. And yet, after 6 decades, we're still here fighting for those changes. In recent years, because it would be incorrect to say that nothing was accomplished, but in recent years, within the last 10 and maybe 20 years, it seems as if the only victories that have been given to racial equality here in the US, especially as it relates to black Americans, have been nothing but tokenism, cultural tokenism. And these token type victories don't really change the social, economic, and political dynamic of black Americans within this society. In reality, it has remained the same. And for those that are listening and may not understand the term cultural tokenism, then I'll give an example. It's like the example of the fight to remove Confederate flags from public places, for instance, or to change the names of schools and other such places from the names of generals that were in the Confederate Army, Robert E. Lee, and others, or the tearing down of Confederate monuments. These victories are what is called cultural tokenism. They may be victories in a sense, but they're not victories that ultimately change the social, economic, and political standing of black Americans here in the society. It literally doesn't change uh, our condition at all. It literally doesn't change our condition at all. So it's tokenism. It's a means for politicians to come and say, look at what we did for you. Look at what we did for you at the same time doing nothing for you. In reality. In reality. And one of the things I want to point out, there was a study from the Brookings Institute, and it was released in February of 2020. And I just want to I want to read and present this study to show or to illustrate or emphasize exactly what I mean as it relates to these token victories that haven't really changed the systemic racism that's found within the society that's adversely and negatively impacting the black community. So within this study, and it was stated that the net worth of a typical white family here in America is $171,000. 171,000, six figures. Well, the typical net worth of a black family in a society is a little over 17,000. A little over 17,000. Now, this study was conducted in 2016. And when we look at those numbers, there's a big disparity between the two. 171,000 to 17,000. There's a very tremendous disparity between the two. This illustrates two distinct things. One, accumulated inequality and discrimination. Accumulated inequality and discrimination. That's one. And then two, it illustrates the difference in power and opportunity. The difference in power and opportunity. Meaning, if I was to simplify what I'm saying, There is, in reality, no equality as it relates to opportunity here in America. There is no equality. Even though America sells itself on being the land of opportunity and free and liberated and thus forth and so on, the statistics are showing something different. The statistics are showing something adversely that's in opposition to the claim that is usually made. So the reality is that there will never be a change to this situation as long as the Muslims within the black community's voice is not relevant to the discussion. There will never be a change unless the Muslims within the black community's voice has some impact and some relevance. Has some impact and some relevance. Because as is well known, for the last 6 decades, when people were approached within the black community, black so-called black leadership, and thus forth and so on, the Muslims were never at the table. The Muslims were never at the table. The Muslims within the black community were never at the table discussing the concrete solutions that can be hammered out as it relates to solving some of these problems, especially within the last decade or two. I haven't heard of it or seen it. So the rock bottom line is this is very important in order to establish substantial change. Why? Because one, between 45 to 49% of all new converts in the United States are coming from the black community. That means half of the converts that are accepting Islam are coming out of the black community. And although we accept Islam and accept the guidance that has been revealed from above the seven heavens, we are still black in America. And so these statistics and these disparities that I just mentioned are still adversely affecting us in some way or another. And this is a reality that can't be dismissed. We can't become Muslim and then act like the society isn't what it is anymore. This society is the way it has been prior to one accepting Islam. And after one accepts Islam, its reality still remains the same. And so this is something that has to be acknowledged and has to be dealt with head on. It has to be dealt with head on. And so we as Muslims, the way that we can attempt to tackle some of these problems is that we have to start advancing the Muslim voice within the black community. We have to start advancing the Muslim voice within the black community. And for those that may be outside of the black community from amongst the Muslims, then we have to give assistance to the initiatives that are found within the masajid and the Islamic organizations within the black community in order to make the quote unquote black Muslims' voice relevant within their own community, And this in reality is from assisting upon al-bir wa taqwa. As Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم وعدوان. Yani, and aid one another upon righteousness and fear of Allah, and do not aid one another upon sin and transgression. Upon sin and transgression. So one of the things that I like to emphasize, I just said it, but I like to emphasize it, is that assistance has to be given to initiatives that are taking place, that are organized and or established by Muslims within the black community. And these initiatives can't be overlooked and can't be dismissed, especially when we look at the reality that half of the converts that are accepting Islam are out of this community. So if we see that, and we see that this is the statistic, then there should be some type of interest and some type of uh, enthusiasm to ensure that the people within these communities, Islam is reaching as many people within these communities as possible. But for that to happen, then the organizations that are within these communities and the initiatives that are taking place within these communities has to be assisted. They have to be assisted because you can't establish anything without taking the necessary means in order to establish it. In order to establish it. There's a principle, لا يتم الواجب إلا بشيء فهو واجب. If you cannot complete an obligatory thing except by way of some other thing, then that other thing in itself is obligatory as well. It in itself is obligatory as well. And there are many examples, like during the time of the Prophet, there was a statement of Allah in Surah Tawbah, وَلَا أَرَادُوا الْخُرُوجِ يَعَدُّ له عدة, that that if they had desired to go out, yani for to fight al jihad, then they would have made preparations. They would have made preparations. And my musaf seems to be falling apart. But they would have made preparations, meaning they would have taken the necessary means to be able to go out and fight. They would have prepared prior by buying weaponry and thus forth and so on. They would that was necessary in order for them to achieve the actual goal of being on a battlefield fighting. So if it was obligatory to be on a battlefield fighting, and they couldn't complete that except by doing preparation, then preparation in that aspect would have been obligatory as well. And so, if we want to see Islam flourish in these areas where it's affecting the family structure, it's affecting how business is conducted in these areas. It's affecting the economy of the area. It's affecting the value system of the people in the area and the moral character, and on and on and on and on. Then we as Muslims have to take the necessary steps to bring that to fruition. To bring that to fruition. And so this would mean making the Muslim voice relevant within these communities by assisting, from one perspective, assisting in the initiatives and the organizations that are within these communities to help strengthen them, within these communities, to strengthen their voice within these communities, Now, at the moment, I at the moment can't think of any organizations at the moment. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but at the moment I can't think of any. But I'm going to use, for example, an organization that I just started, along with our brother Abu Abdus Salam and some other brothers. We started the nonprofit organization Talha Islamic Ministry, and walillah alhamd, we received our tax exempt status from the IRS, if I'm not mistaken, in February or March of this year. And so the goal of the Islamic ministry, Talha Islamic Ministry, and it's named after Talha ibn Ubaidullah. The goal of this particular ministry is to improve the religious worship, education, and well-being of the Muslims within the inner city and or underprivileged areas. This is the goal of the nonprofit. And one of the things that we're trying to do, because we see this as being essential, is we're trying to do some institution building. We're trying to do some institution building. And so we have a plan, and I put it in the description. And if I end up loading this to YouTube, then inshallah, I'll also put in a description. But I put in the description a link to the GoFundMe for this particular project, so people can read and get an awareness, more of an awareness of what we're trying to do. But I'll likewise explain it now. Like, one of the goals of the ministry is to do some institution building. And right now we're focused, or trying to be focused, on the city of Detroit, which is, I'm not sure the percentage of Black Americans that are directly in Detroit. I believe it's around 85%. But we chose that particular city due to the tremendous opportunities that are found within that city, from a property, both residential and commercial property, that is more readily available, as opposed to being in a place like New York or Los Angeles or Chicago and thus forth and so on, where the cost is a whole lot more expensive. So we formulated a plan to to start what we will consider to be the nucleus of a fully functioning Islamic community. That being uh, establishing a masjid, a school, businesses that will support both the masjid and the school, eventually come up with a property procurement plan, buying up the residential property around the masjid, and likewise starting two transitional homes, one for homeless brothers and one for homeless sisters. And as we know, for brothers and sisters that are in the community, we know that homelessness occurs for varying reasons. You have some brothers that go to prison, accept Islam in prison, return home, and have nowhere to go. Or you have some people, brother or sister, accept Islam, and their families in the beginning kind of turn away from them and give them no support, and they're on their they're on their own, not necessarily disowned, but some, you may find that in some cases as well. The point that I'm making, though, is that these are institutions that will help serve the Islamic cause within the community. And we're not limiting that goal to that, but that's one of the goals that the ministry would like to accomplish. And so the main point that I'm trying to make is that the the organizations or the initiatives that are taking place within the black community that will serve as a benefit for the black community in a sense, because it further solidifies Islam's standing within these communities, then these particular projects should be aided and or assisted. They should be aided and or assisted to the point that the Muslims within these communities are able to create their own economy and create a fully functioning community, to the point where now when people want to discuss how to solve this problem and how to solve that problem, they're calling the Muslims to the table to try to figure these things out. And this isn't far fetched, because there have there has been some communities where the Muslims were called upon to aid in bringing about solutions to problems that were taking place within a particular community, even though it may have been on a local level. Yet and still, because the Muslims were organized, they got the attention of lawmakers within these localized areas. And I'm not saying this is something that's been widespread throughout the states. I'm thinking of three specific communities right now where I know that was a reality. Even back home where I'm from in Los Angeles, the masjid that I attended, the street that it was on a residential street, and the neighbors expressed more than once how glad they were that the Muslims were present and there. And that's because prior to the Muslims being there, it was a gang infested uh, area. But when the Muslims came in, came on a block of darkness, but they brought light with them. And they were able to transform that 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 localized area for the better, and the neighbors recognized that. For that small neighborhood, the neighbors recognized that. And so this is the beauty of Islam and the Muslims. When we step into an area, we should be somewhat community. We should be active within the community, transforming the community from that which would be considered detestable to that which is considered to be, yani, something that is desirable. From transforming from that which was detestable to that which is desirable. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. My main point is that if we want to, if we want sound solutions to some of these problems, me myself personally, in my opinion, I don't see these problems, a change in these problems, unless the Muslims' voice becomes relevant as it relates to being able to put forth sound solutions outside of just cultural tokenism, sound solutions that actually change the disparities that are taking place here. And basically, all we have to do is look to our book, the book in the Sunnah, and the qawaid that are derived therefrom. If we're operating from that, then the suggestions that we make, or the and or moves that we make, will be a general benefit for each individual, will be a general benefit for the family structure, will be a general benefit for the community in its entirety. And Allah wa Ta'ala knows best. For this reason, Allah wa Ta'ala teaches us, Inna deen indallah al-Islam. That the deen with Allah, it is al-Islam. Due to this guidance that is found within it that transforms the lives of individuals, that transforms the lives of individuals for the better, for the better. And this betterment that befalls individuals is clear for all that see it. It's not shrouded in mist, for lack of better expressions, but it's overtly clear to all that see it. To all that see it. So if we want to be a benefit when dealing with this issue and dealing with this discussion, it is imperative for our voices to become relevant within these communities. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.